Welcome to CharityVillage Connects. I'm Mary Barrell. Recently, there have been many reports about alarming challenges facing the nonprofit sector, including unprecedented demand for services, falling donations, and staff burnout. But there is other research from Give3 and Sector 3 Insights that also found that declining fundraising dollars has more to do with donors' economic situations and larger sociological shifts, and less to do with concerns about organizations being deficient in fundraising strategies. We're taking the pulse of fundraising for nonprofits in 2024 and looking ahead to major trends that will impact the sector in the future. Joining me to discuss these important issues is John Hallward, chairman of Give3 and president of Sector 3 Insights. After a very successful career in the marketing research industry, John launched the charity Give3 to encourage greater giving and introduced Giving Tuesday and the Great Canadian Giving Challenge to the Canadian nonprofit sector, which have triggered tens of millions of additional donation dollars and other acts of giving in Canada. As president of Sector 3 Insights, John leads the social enterprise research firm to bring cutting-edge research tools from the corporate world to help the nonprofit sector succeed. John, welcome to CharityVillage Connects.
Thank you, Barry. My pleasure.
Well, let's do a little check-in. Last time we chatted with you, we were talking about trust in the sector and whether that was impacting the generosity of Canadians. Have there been any updates on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's many reasons why, or many hypotheses why generosity in charity is declining. And one of them was this idea that maybe younger generations are losing trust. And just recently, I think last week, Proof Strategies, who continues to do a kind of a trust monitor of Canadian institutions amongst Canadians, just released a report and of all the different types of industrial sectors and sectors of society. NGOs have the most trust of all the different types of organizations. And actually, over the last couple of years, it's slightly increased in terms of trustworthiness. So I really just don't think there's any license to believe that we have a crisis of trust in the charity sector at this point.
Well, that's good news. I hope you're right. Give3 and Sector 3 Insights just recently published research on generosity in Canada. Can you tell us how this research came about and what the intent was?
Yeah, so it kind of followed a little bit on this idea of the discussions we had a while ago on trust. And there are many others with different hypotheses as to what's going on. And in particular, what we wanted to do was bring greater attention to what we feel is a growing charity gap. And I think Duke at Canada Helps us talked about this. Recently, he had a press conference emphasizing the demand side, which all the charities are feeling from people in need. And I kind of wanted to look a little bit more on the supply side, if you will, in terms of money coming in. And so the real question, I guess, is it truly declining? Is generosity and giving declining? We know that giving is declining in terms of as measured in our T1 tax returns that taxpayers file each year, that the incidence of Canadians claiming any charitable tax receipt has been declining for 30 years. And now it's well below 1 in 5 Canadians. Now, some are saying, well, yeah, it's not such a big problem because millennials are very philanthropic, they're very empathetic and very generous. And maybe it's just that they're giving in different ways. So over time, recently, we have giving circles, we have GoFundMe. Of course, people can be generous in terms of giving of time, giving of items. And a lot of those other modes or pro-social behaviors aren't well measured. So maybe then it's just a shifting of the nature of generosity. And it was the researcher in me that says, well, we can measure that. We can ask Canadians about a bunch of different pro-social and generosity type behaviors. And that was the genesis of the study, to try to answer, is generosity truly declining or just shifting? And how does that look in particular amongst the future generations? And that was really the genesis of what we were trying to do.
That's really an interesting question. So what were the, let's say, 3 biggest takeaways from the report?
Well, unfortunately, generosity is indeed declining. So one could argue that if those who aren't giving are more generous in volunteering of time, which, by the way, is also down in terms of measurement, or giving up other types of behaviors, then maybe generosity is not declining. But in the research, when we looked at all these different types of behaviors, it is a net decline. The people aren't just shifting, and the younger people aren't giving less money because they're more volunteering or giving more money directly to the person in the street. Really, just across all of these pro-social generosity type behaviors, it's declining. The second big takeaway, I guess, which really is upsetting, is that the younger generations are less pro-social, if you will. So, listen, all Canadians are empathetic. Nobody kind of says the hell with everybody else. So we all have high incidences of saying, yes, I care about other people. It's not so much the incident that matters, but it's the volume of behaviors you're willing to be altruistic with and give and donate. So younger Canadians give less in terms of money, and you could argue, well, they have less, and that makes sense. So if you start to look then at attitudes in terms of asking them, well, hypothetically, if somebody was earning X tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, what percent of their income do you think they should be giving to charity? And we ask all age groups this question. And it's the younger ones who had the lower percentages. They're saying, oh, well, they should only be giving 1 or 2%. Whereas older generations for the exact same question are saying, oh, well, hypothetically, if somebody's earning 200,000, they should be giving 3 or 4%. Another question we asked was about attitudes, about whose responsibility to fix the problems in your community, who has those responsibilities. And middle-aged and older Canadians are more likely to say, well, it's our community, it's our responsibility. The younger ones are less likely to say that. It's kind of not our problem. It's you boomers created the problem, therefore you have to fix the problem. It's not my problem. And so that's not a very strong pro-social attitude, and it's concerning. They also have, or feel they have, fewer friends that are giving, so that mentoring and peer pressure is smaller. I think they kind of claim, oh yeah, 1 in 5 of my friends are giving. But when you actually look at that peer group, 70+% are generous in some way. So there's real disconnects in what's going on. And then you alluded to a little bit, the last kind of insight was, well, what are the drivers? Or what are the barriers leading to this decay? Clearly, one of them is economic. People are feeling pressure. Some argue that Canadians aren't necessarily less rich, and particularly those with stocks and investments in the market. Obviously, it's been doing very well for the last decade. But perception is reality, I guess, and the Canadians are perceiving economic stress. They're feeling stressed, inflation, recession, etc. So that's a problem. But as I mentioned, so are the social values declining. And I guess another one related to social values is decline of religiosity. Religious Canadians of any religion are more giving than non-religious. And what's happened since World War II is that religions have been declining in the Western world. So as religion declines, so do the morals and the messaging of religions to be charitable to your fellow citizen.
So if we dig into this a little bit more, I think, are you talking about like Gen Z in terms of these recent trends that you're noticing? Is that what we're talking about? Somebody who's, just approaching 20 or, early 20s?
Yeah, to be frank, I tried to look at all of them, but it's really under 35. And I kind of grouped them all because if you start to look at it just from in 5-year increments, it's too small a slice to be honest of the data. And clearly 18, 19, 20, 23-year-olds just don't have money to give, and it's very hard for them to be generous in other ways. So most of the insights really is kind of the millennials down, Gen X, Y, and Z kind of combined. But there's not a lot of hope to suddenly say, well, those 22 and 24-year-olds are much different. They really aren't.
Okay, that's really interesting because we know that social impact is quite meaningful to the younger generation. I guess when we think about generosity, is it true that it's about more than just donating money to charities? Is there other things that that they're doing? Are they more inclined to volunteer or give in other ways? I'm just curious, just how much you dug into this data that is somewhat alarming, actually.
Yeah, Yeah, so in the data, and people can help themselves. It's free in the public domain if they go to Sector 3 Insights. Um, yeah, 90% of Canadians are generous in one way or another, from helping coach a school little league team to helping a neighbor with meals to formally giving money to registered charities. I mean, there's a whole range of generosity. And if you look across all of that to say, well, what percent of Canadians are generous in any format? The answer is 90%, which is virtually 100 in research terms. The most popular is giving items. So doing spring cleaning and giving your items to Goodwill or some other form of reuse. That's the most popular. The least popular is volunteering time. Only about a quarter, I think, of Canadians have volunteered 3 hours or more in the past month. So that's not as popular there. And of course, you can give outside of registered charities. So giving to organizations, to neighbors, to strangers, so all of that's there. The problem really is not so much that people are generous or not, but it's the volume and the amount of generosity. And that's where the younger, even in their attitudes, their social norms, their expectations for what people should be giving are coming down. Because, as I mentioned, with the decline of religiosity, religions were very good at this concept of tithing. And tithing literally means 1/10. And if you think of 1/10 of one's income, that's 10%, right? I mean, that is a huge number. And as people become less religious and don't even understand what tithing is, then you can see that the sense of social norm becomes, well, what is everybody else giving? And if everybody else is not giving very much, or you perceive that half your friends aren't giving anything, then it's the volume of your gifts that decline. And I know there's a hypothesis south of the border from some who I've talked with, very smart academics, are saying they're questioning whether all this digital technology and access to giving is undermining that sense of a high social norm. Because if you can text $5 or $10, if you can do and participate in Bell Mental Health Day and give $5, that's a very low gift size to feel good about yourself. But if you do give $5 and you feel good about yourself, then it's going to just undermine the whole idea that really you shouldn't feel good unless you're tithing. Now obviously that's an extremely high number, but it's almost on a mercenary level that the cost of feeling good about oneself is coming down.
Well, that sort of flies in the face of other research I've heard that says young people, through the use of social media and the way that sort of fundraising platforms work now, where you share your giving with your network on your social media channels, it encourages other people to do so. So the scalability of actually fundraising, perhaps micro donations, but they could build to be larger among a larger group of people that you're sharing your donation with and influencing others to also give it within your social media um, network. That's sort of the other piece of that digital giving kind of argument. So you're not seeing that might also bear fruits for the nonprofit sector?
Not in terms of volume. So, I mean, yes, and anybody under the age of 35 is much more active in social media and advocating and socializing and liking these types of posts. And people who are 75, 80 are not. But guess who's giving the most money? Those 75 and 80-year-olds. Um, so the people who are setting the high standard are not socializing, and giving circles tend to be small gifts. Mobile giving tend to be small gifts. Giving directly to somebody in need tends to be small gifts, $5, $10, $20, not 1,000. So the socialization tends to be at the much lower gift levels. And if you can feel good about yourself at that low gift level, then the motivation to be more generous constantly through the year, it kind of gets mitigated, if you will. So we're kind of losing the social norm for what truly is to be generous and giving.
That's concerning. What does this mean for fundraisers and organizations? Is there anything that they can do to mitigate these kinds of shifts that you're talking about, which they do appear to be beyond their control in terms of what you've found.
Yeah, no, it's a great question because um, I don't feel personally that whining about any of this is going to help much. So yes, it's perhaps a necessary first step to prove where the problem is, so you know what to fix. But we need to get on with fixing it. Um, and I think it's very difficult for 75,000 operating charities, of which half don't have any people in them or paid staff and stuff. So they're just not equipped to take this kind of on at a strategic, nationwide, existential threat to the sector. So, what can a charity do? Well, yes, maybe they can become a little bit more efficient in their fundraising efforts and leverage best practices, leverage emotion, tell narrative, those kind of things. But in and of itself, what we found with the research is that there's not a lack of trust with charities. People believe that charities serve a good role, etc. So I don't think the problem rests with the charities. Therefore, it's hard for the charities to fix the problem. The problem is much more sociological and decline of religion, of which any one charity is not equipped really to deal with that. So, and by the way, there also are lots of pathways to give. So the charity as a sector has done very well with Canada Helps and giving platforms and mobile giving. So we've made it easy for people to give. Now it's just a question of getting them sociologically to be motivated to give. And I think that's a bigger strategic challenge to the sector, which ultimately goes back to your first question, was like, why did we do this? It is to start the process towards a strategic plan. Like, we know these problems. Let's find out what the reasons are, what the drivers and explanations are, so we know what to fix. And now the next step for us is to get on with new policy ideas and solutions to fix these problems.
Is it possible that one becomes more generous as one matures and understands the problems that are so critical to society? When I look back at my life as a young person, I was going to school a lot. I didn't have a lot of spare cash. I certainly didn't give as much as I do now, but now I can afford it, and B, I've become more aware as I matured on the critical issues that charities serve in our community. Is it part of the maturing process? I guess I would ask.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that you find across all research in all walks of life, is that when you look at the old and you look at the young and you see differences, the question then is, do the young maintain their value system as they grow old, or do the young change and become more like the old as they get old? So that's always the challenge. Um, so yeah, I think there's going to be some of that. Clearly, in our research, one of the questions we asked was how they felt about and how aware are they that charities in their community are struggling and need their help. And the young were a lot less aware of that, or less believing that that was truly the case. So there is room, and I guess what you're alluding to is that as one gets old, you learn, you become aware, you become wise. I think that's part of the solution going forward, is that we need to promote these insights and these values and sensitivities. And religion was pretty good at that, because Friday, Saturday, Sunday, church, temple, or synagogue, you got that messaging. Well, guess what? If that's not happening and you're at home watching Netflix and it's video on demand and coffee on demand and music on demand and it's I want what I want when I want it. Wow, that's what we have to overcome.
Well, what do you think? What do you think personally can be done to address this with young Canadians? Are there things that nonprofits should be doing to better engage a younger demographic sooner, or to educate them over time if it is a part of the maturing process? Is it, leaning into starting with those micro donations, using social media and the other channels that young people like to use, and then engaging them in different ways as they mature and get older?
Yeah, I don't think there's one silver bullet. And I think with a lot of social movements like recycling, don't smoke, do your seatbelt up. These all required multifaceted things. Put out your recycling box, all those things. It takes several different angles at that, from within the schools, from parents, from the municipalities, from government. And I think we could learn from all that and apply that to the philanthropic sector. So I think there's probably multiples of things. One thing I'm kind of curious or interested in is the model we saw with participation. So participation is a small investment from the government to help encourage Canadians to be more healthy and exercise more, and the payout is greater productivity and less demands on the healthcare system. So a small investment goes a long way. You kind of wonder if the same concepts would apply in philanthropic, that Canadians are caring, and caring Canadians help others, and here are ways to help. And you just try to push the messaging in the void left by the decline of religiosity. Mentoring, maybe new tax laws, maybe volunteers should be able to get a discount in their taxes payable. If you give money, you get a discount in your charity tax credit. Can we use something similar, perhaps, in volunteering? So we need to start exploring methods, multiple methods, to start to address this problem. Otherwise, as baby boomers die out, as religion declines, we already are in a slippery slope down into a death spiral. So.
Wow, that is difficult to contemplate. Are there any other findings that you'd like to highlight for our audience that you think are really important for them to bear in mind?
Yeah, and it's a little bit different, I think, maybe than what you're asking for specifically to the study or to the tactical things. I come to the charity sector from the outside. I came from the for-profit world. I was an entrepreneur. I started a business. I'm not a big fan of bureaucracy and paradigms. Entrepreneurs try to break through, and any means to get to the ends is kind of fair game. And so I come to the charity sector, and it's very obvious very quickly that there's no incentive for the charity sector to become efficient. There's no for-profit payout and reward to take risks. And it's a little bit the opposite, that if you follow popularism and woke popularism, and you touch all the right hot buttons, and you follow a good, clean process, then you're less likely to get fired or kicked out of your job, and you're more likely to continue on. So rocking the boat is not encouraged. Being innovative and shaking the tree is not encouraged. Even to the point of being critical in the sector is kind of shunned and not encouraged. But if one wants to be better, you have to be self-critical. And so I kind of unashamedly come at this as the glass, even if it's not half and half, but it's 3/4 full. I'm still looking at the quarter that's not full, because we continue to have sociological problems. We continue to have a deteriorating environment, people dying of opioid crisis, cancer, etc. So we cannot be complacent. We cannot be happy with what we're doing. So we have to be critical. We have to change the status quo. We have to take risks. And I think, to me, that's the message I would like more people in the sector to appreciate, is that you can't be defensive. It's not about process. It's about purpose, and it's about outcomes. And like I say, as long as people are dying, we've got to do better. The good news is, I think there's lots of resources. I mean, look, the charity sector's got tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars flowing in it every year. Foundations, the numbers change and the markets are up. So somewhere between 140 and 150 billion dollars sitting on the sidelines in foundation investment accounts. So there's no shortage of money. That's the good news. It means, hey, great, we got the resources. We kind of have the smarts. Now we just need to make some smart little tactical decisions to spend a fraction of that money in new, innovative ways. Maybe like a don't action, like participation, but don't action, whatever. So we need to start creating these new things, and it's the attitude that we need to kind of get on with, in my view. Let's be self-critical, let's change, and let's be less defensive.
Well, I tend to agree with you. I don't think you can solve problems without actually calling them out and looking at them squarely, and attacking them with a critical lens. So I agree that I think it's it isn't helpful to be defensive. One has to take a hard look at things in order to be able to change them. So I really do appreciate you speaking your mind frankly, and being sharing your your great experience and knowledge with our sector. I'd like to wrap up with your thoughts on where philanthropy and fundraising are headed. Um, are you optimistic? Even though you look at that, one quarter half empty, are you optimistic about the sector's ability to continue to engage donors and fund programming for the years ahead?
Yeah, it's a great question. I find myself to be a realist, so like follow the facts as a market researcher. So I am very concerned about the trends. And if we don't do something, the trends will continue. Um, I'm heartened by the fact that we are humans. Canadians do care. We do wish to be helpful and all those good things. Um, but being humans, we compare ourselves to others. And if nobody else is giving, then what should I give? So all these little humanistic things need to be dealt with. Um, as I mentioned, I think there are lots of resources in this sector. I don't think we're going to get there voluntarily. We've asked foundations to up their spending. During COVID, we asked them to step up and spend their money and increase their grant giving. They barely did. The rest has continued to grow right through the rainy day of the pandemic. So I'm now kind of thinking we need systemic change. We need to put things into law to require, force, or oblige better outcomes. And I should say too, yes, I do have a little bit of a cranky attitude about all of this. And I'm not cranky at what's getting done. I mean, God, imagine where we would be in our communities if we didn't have the giving that we do have, the volunteers that we do have. So, I'm so appreciative of what we do have. It's just I'm cranky about what's not getting done. And to me, there is hope, but we do have to get on with it, and it won't happen naturally. We're going to have to get some new systemic policies in place. Otherwise, yeah, I'm not happy. I'm not encouraged.
Well, John, thank you for sharing your fascinating and really enlightening and disturbing data that you've been able to find, and doing so much to help nonprofits really try to meet their challenges armed with helpful and meaningful data and practical information in order to increase their impact and their potential to successfully deliver on their mission. Thank you very much for joining us on Charity Village Connects.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Mary, for this opportunity. If I could say one quick thing, we're hoping to gear up on a creation of a strategic plan to engage people and to really start finding pragmatic solutions. So anybody, not necessarily right now, but they can go to Give3, the website. But we're redoing the website, and hopefully in the near future we'll start to push out blogs and posts to invite people to share their strategic visions, so we can all try to find the solutions we need. So thank you for the opportunity.
Well, I'd certainly love to circle back with you when that gets underway to learn more about, how the community and the sectors responded and some of the potential strategies that could be looked at. That would be a fascinating podcast. So I'll be knocking on your door again, John, I'm sure.
No, I hope so. That'd be wonderful. Thank you, Mary, for your support. It takes all teamwork, so we'll get there together.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us again.
Take care. Best wishes.